So I grew up in Bristol, in a family of, there's six of us, my mum, my dad. I had an older sister, then a brother, and then a little sister. And it was quite a difficult upbringing to some extent. There was addiction in my family. My dad was a compulsive gambler, which put quite heavy pressure on the family unit. And my mum also suffered with mental health issues. I struggled in the classroom. I um, was always almost put with the naughty kids. And we literally got sent to a classroom at the end of the hall. And I'd say there was maybe about 4 or 5 of us. And I swear down, what they did, they gave us a colouring book. And they literally we just did colouring in. I also experienced some trauma while I was there, around bullying and abuse. And also at this point, my brother was on the verge of getting kicked out, and he was being statemented because they said he had ADHD.
So there was a diagnosis in the family at that point?
Yes.
That's interesting. But you didn't get assessed at all when that happened?
No. So basically, where he was more destructive and throwing chairs and skipping out of school, I felt very invisible in my family growing up. And then, so by the time I got to senior school, I was already very behind. I literally could not do my ABC. And I remember being in a class, like my first year of senior school, in year 7, being in a class of like 5 other kids, learning to do our ABCs. You're in bottom class for pretty much everything. And
so you got bullied again?
Yes.
Social bullying.
Yeah, did suffer with bullying at school. And I would fall into the what you could call the wrong crowd. But the thing was, this crowd was quite accepting of me. I really struggled with my own age group in school, and I tended to attach to older like students who were a bit wave stray. Like, and again, I remember my maths teacher sat next to me getting infuriated with me. Like, not like, why can you not understand this?
Oh, how awful.
Remember, like, we'd have parties, and normally I'd go to a friend's house, and where my dad was caught up in his own addiction, like, he'd buy my alcohol for me, and I'm 13.
13 is very young to be going to parties with drink.
Well, this is it. He'd buy me like 8 cans of cider, and I'd go to a party, maybe share a couple, but the rest was mine.
Right.
And then I discovered that the effect it gave me, that it, well, I want to say, like, let me out of my shell a bit, because obviously you lose inhibition. Is that
yes.
Right? And you lose like your inhibition when you're drinking, especially at that sort of young age. Yeah, and it wasn't just alcohol. Her brother was a drug dealer, my friend, and and he was only like, I'd say 15, 16, like selling drugs. So he'd sell us cannabis or like the resin form of that.
Yeah.
So then it wasn't just drinking alcohol, it was smoking cannabis as well. And it kind of became a pattern, like, that we could go to this person's house, we could get away with what we were doing. The substance use took more of a hold on me than I would say my peers. Like, I remember being in school, having a bottle of vodka on me, and when there was a class that I didn't want to go to, I had a hiding place in the school premises that I'd go to, and I'd drink alcohol, I'd self-harm, because I was so, really struggling.
Yeah.
Really struggling. But then I had to go and see my own therapist, from, I don't know, about 13, 14. And again, I I was just so scared, and I just held back a lot of things that were going on, like, you know, trauma in the home place,
Yeah.
violence, abuse, all that kind of things. Like, you know, I just find it very difficult to have a voice where you've kind of felt invisible and unseen,
Yes.
not only at home but also in school. And like there were signs because of that. Obviously, I was self-harming to cope with my emotions. That's like a red flag there. But most of the time, they'd just ring my parents if they realised I'd self-harmed, get them to pick me up.
This is the teachers.
Yeah, because I normally get sent to the school nurse. But it was very judging. Like, it was very, like, you know, why are you doing that to yourself?
Oh, right. Like you've been a naughty girl for doing this, not like, let me help you.
Yeah. It escalated from drink, cannabis, to taking pills, you know,
Yes.
ecstasy. Then it jumped to cocaine, you know, so snorting cocaine. And then, you know, and I remember one time we ended up at council flats in Bristol, and they were like, oh, we're going to get a lick. And I'm like, what's a lick? And they're like, oh, it's crack.
Oh, right.
And I was like, you know, well, I want to try it. I remember going to a drug agency in Bristol as a very young teenager.
Yes.
I want to say 16, 17, you know, and I went to this drug agency near me and asked them what kind of help they could give me. And I was told, like, how I took it, and how I think about it now, it was like, well, we mainly work with people that are on crack and heroin, and
Oh,
that, you know, my drug use wasn't
bad enough for them.
Yeah.
Crikey, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Did they come up with anywhere else for you to go? Or
No, and I was literally like, oh, right, so let's wait for me to get on crack and heroin, and then I can come back and get some help. I know, and it took a lot to go there. I was very young. You know, I'd experienced a lot of trauma. It's very difficult, you know. And coming out of there, I was just like, what's the point?
yes.
What is the point? Going to see this nurse. Again, she couldn't reach me because the lack of education around the mental health, the ADHD stuff.
Yes, which nobody's still not done.
Still not picked up, still not, you know, because I always got diagnosed with depression, anxiety.
Yes.
That, you know, that was what the doctors always said. I was on antidepressants from a very young age. You know, I struggled with self-harm all the way through that time. And, you know, like now they will attribute self-harm with the intensity of ADHD.
Uh-huh.
You know, and, you know, that really played out through most of my life. And in the end, I had a breakdown. And I couldn't work. I literally became non-verbal. I couldn't talk. Yeah, it was a very dark time, you know. And I, you know, and also I struggle with like suicidal ideation.
Yes.
Again, most of my life. So I went to Bristol Drugs Project.
Yes.
Right, well, I rang them and I said I needed help. And I went and had an assessment with them. And they first said I had to go to alcohol groups up at Southmead Hospital.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it's terrifying, like having to do this, you know, walk into a room with strangers and sit in a circle. And because, like, you know, like my parents were really worried. My mum was like, oh, you know, you've crossed the line. And I was in denial. I was in denial, you know, because of masking, because of being able to do that. And hyping what's going to go on the scenes, I was able to mask and, you know, still play a part in life, as they say, and was quite a functioning addict. But they wanted to detox me at home.
I see, yes.
And I was like, that's not going to work. I'm going to take whatever you give me and I'm going to use as well.
Yes.
I'm going to be honest with you. So my worker got me a care manager, and she was the first one who actually said about going to rehab.
Right.
And getting doing a proper detox in hospital, then going to rehab.
Yes.
Now I was terrified, but it felt right. I don't know what it was. I was done. It was like that or suicide. It literally was that. I was like,
pretty stark.
I can't carry on, you know, this using to cope, self-harming to cope, not having the skills to communicate or express my feelings. So got to rehab, really got the help I needed to work around the trauma I'd experienced. You know, there's a lot of trauma, you know, from my childhood, from my young, like basically most of my life. You know, so I managed to do my 6 months in treatment. Because they said about resettling, and because at first, in my mind, because they give you 3 months to start with. I was like, I'll do 3 months, I'll get better, and I'll go back to Bristol, and everything will be great. After 3 months, I realised how unwell I was. It was like they'd educated me enough to see that, you know, I had quite severe mental health issues, and I had a lot of trauma.
Yes.
And this needed addressing.
Yes.
You know, so I was given an extra 3 months to do a lot of work around that. And then they said about resettling, and again, it felt right.
Yes.
Scary, of course. But I went into one of their dry houses in the area, and I'm able to live there for a year. And it was the first year of my life, like, where I felt alive, I felt present, and I lived.
That must have been marvellous after so much struggling.
So after using substances for that long, not understanding why I was the way I was through trauma, through undiagnosed ADHD, not getting the help and support I needed, you know, with it being inattentive ADHD, because I was quieter, you know, you tend to suffer alone in silence 90% of the time. You know, so, you know, I had this like year of really living. And yeah, and so, you know, my friend, he got diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, you know, and obviously my brother had it, and I, you know, I felt like I had it, like inside and in here, like where like the way I can describe it, like my head was a tornado.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
Constantly thinking, like, this brain does not stop. I went to the doctor at my GP service, and I said, you know, I think I've got ADHD.
Yes.
You know, I'd like to speak to someone about it. And the first thing she said, why do you want that label?
So she was trying to bat it off, really.
She was like, why do you want that label? And I looked at her and I said, I don't want a label. I want clarity. I want to understand why I am the way I am. He was like, yeah, I'm going to diagnose you with inattentive.
Yes.
ADHD.
Yes.
And it just gave clarity to, like, it's because of this.
Yes.
Your brain does not work like...
There's nothing wrong with you.
There's nothing wrong with me. My brain just works differently.
You're different, yeah.
My brain works differently. And, you know, and I felt really emotional. And, you know, and it still took quite a while to process that, to be like, right, I've got the diagnosis. You know, I went through a grieving process for the younger parts of me.
Yes.
That got missed.
Right.
And I just wanted to know.
Yes.
And I wanted clarity. I wanted to know for my own sanity. You know, but I didn't want to be, shut down to the option of medication, which is, you know, to help give you focus, energy, concentration, you know, and yes, it is stimulant based. It's a controlled drug.
Yes.
You know, and obviously being in recovery, you know, obviously I've been in recovery from substances for 8 years. This is something I discussed with my sponsor, and went through it with her. And, you know, it's about having that accountability of her, you know, on what I was taking, when I was going up a dose. When I had some surgery recently, I couldn't take it.
Yeah.
And the few days that I didn't have it, you notice it. And I take only what I'm prescribed, you know. I don't abuse it. But I think what I want to get across is the fact that, you know, even from a young age, you know, I went to to get help around the drugs, it was very lacking.
Yes.
I went to at a young age, and then I went um, I was involved with like mental health services from a very young age as well. Again, never got picked up, never got recognised.
It's lucky your friend spotted it.
Well, that's it, and I think it was the first time, obviously I wasn't using substances. I'd like put work into my recovery of abstinence, and I had done a lot of work on the emotional levels, learn vocabulary to express feelings and communicate. And it was the first time that I fought for myself.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not the first time. Like, obviously, I fought for myself to get into recovery, right? That was a big thing, and obviously, but that was like the stepping stone for me to fight for a diagnosis around ADHD. And it was a fight.
Yeah.
I had to fight to get that assessment with someone who is educated in it and can give a diagnosis, for them to see me, hear me, give me a chance to verbalize, how my ADHD plays out. And yeah, like it definitely lifted something from me, and it restored some peace within me. And like I said, I put the brush down that I'm beating myself up with, and I have a lot more compassion for myself today. I mean, my work are very supportive around it, around my ADHD. I don't think I've ever been in a place where it's almost like, safe to have this diagnosis, safe to be who I am, and not judge myself for it.
It's wonderful to hear that, and thanks so much for doing this interview today.
You're welcome.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you.